Hey guys, my name is JC and today we're playing Tribal as requested by you. The goal of this deck is to land as many Changelings on the battlefield as it can, and then resolve powerful Tribal Lords to end the game through various combat related abilities. If you haven't seen the deck tech for this deck yet, then make sure to swing by the channel where we have a video discussing all of the included cards as well as the overall strategy. Let's put this deck to the test and see just how strong a bunch of Changelings and Tribal Lords can be. Alright guys, let's see who we're playing today. We have Ashaya, Soul of the Wild, we have Narset, Enlightened Master, and we also have Lord Xander the Collector. Okay, if we look at our opening hand, it's not bad. I usually like to have 3 lands in an opening hand with our Tribal deck. We do have 2, but at least we do have a turn 2 play. Heronblade Elite and Yuriko are both good as well, and Master Sword Nexus is an all-star in the deck, so it's a little risky, but I think we can keep. We draw 1 land and we're pretty much in the game. And there we go, we draw a land for turn. That's really, really good to see. Alright, well let's start. We'll play our Bloodstained Mire for turn. We'll immediately crack it. We'll put our Watery Grave into play, and we'll have it come into play untapped. And then we'll cast our Shapesharer for turn. And that'll be our turn done. Ashaya plays a land for turn, and now they cast a Soul Ring. And that is it for them. And strangely enough, Narset just moved straight to their end step. I don't know if that was a misclick, because I highly doubt that they've held on to a no-land hand, unless they're trying to do a tricky reanimate shenanigans. No, but they discard Supreme Verdict. Okay. We move to Lord Xander's turn. They just play a tap land for turn. And that is it for them. We draw Udvara Hellkite. Don't really like seeing that this early. Alright, so we'll play our Wooded Foothills for turn. We'll crack it. We'll put our Overgrown Tomb into play, and we'll have it come into play untapped. Now we'll move to combat. Shapesharer can go in at the Ashaya player. Now we'll activate Yuriko's ability and Ninjutsu are in. Damage goes through, that triggers Yuriko. And we draw an irregular cohort and that deals 4 damage to each of our opponents. And that's going to be our turn done. Ashaya plays a land for turn. And now they cast Badoka Gardener. You can tap it, you put a land from your hand onto the battlefield. If you control 10 or more lands, you flip it. And I can't read what that is upside down, but it usually, from memory, makes an XX Elemental based on the number of lands you control. Now they sack their Terramorphic Expanse. So they're going to put a basic land into play tapped, and that's their turn. Narset puts a land into play, and now they cast a Mana Vault. Alright, so they might have kept a greedy hand, but I'm guessing it has a lot of juice in it. They tap their Mana Vault, now they cast a Mind Stone, and they follow that up with an Azoria Signet. Okay, well things definitely turned around for them from turn 1 to turn 2, and that is their turn done. Lord Xander plays a land for turn. And now they cast Chains of Mephistopheles. If a player would draw a card except the first one they draw in each of their draw steps, that player discards a card instead. If the player discards a card this way, they draw a card. If the player doesn't discard a card this way, they mill a card. A lot of text on a card, that's for sure. We draw a Wild Tree for turn. Well, let's start by moving to combat first. We'll send Yuriko at the Narset player. Damage goes through, that triggers Yuriko. We draw a Seagate Lawmaster, so that saps our opponents for 5 life. Okay, so in our second main phase, I think we'll put our World Tree into play tapped, and then we'll just recast our Shapesharer. And that's us done for the turn. Ashaya starts by casting a Crucible of Worlds. You may play land cards from your graveyard, which they have their Terramorphic Expanse, so they put that into play straight away. They crack it, and they put a Forest into play tapped. Now they tap their Badoka Gardener to put a land into play. They put into play a Nykthos, which can generate a lot of mana in a mono green deck. And they are just going to leave it there. Mana Vault triggers on Narset's upkeep, so they're going to take a damage, but it looks like they're just shipping the turn there. Well, that's good news for us. That's one player that we can get some ninjas through to get some damage to trigger Yuriko, and that actually does cause the Narset player to scoop, so I think that greedy hand they kept is probably going to come to bite them back in the bum. So now there is only 3 of us. Let's just hope that Lord Xander doesn't get down any blockers. They play a land for turn, and now they cast a Planar Void. Whenever another card is put into a graveyard from anywhere, exile that card. And that is their turn done. We draw an Avian Changeling for turn. Alright, well we'll start by moving to combat first, so we can see what we draw off Yuriko. We'll send both of them in at Ashaya, because at the moment I'm a little more worried about them than I am Lord Xander. Damage goes through, that triggers Yuriko twice. Our first hit, we get a Bears of Litjara, that deals 3 damage to each opponent. And a Moonglove Changeling, dealing another 3 damage. So Yuriko's certainly starting to do some work. Our opponents are starting to get towards the low 20s. So now we'll play our Savai Triome. It'll come into play tapped. And now I think we set up a bigger mana turn by resolving our Heron Blade Elite. And that way when we cast our Changelings next turn, that's going to buff that up a bit and give us access to a lot more mana. Hopefully start to keep pace with the Ashaya player. So let's get Heron Blade Elite into the battlefield. And let's just pass it there. We'll discard our Arcane Adaptation, seeing as we have Maskwood Nexus in hand. That is going to get exiled due to Planar Void. Ashaya starts by casting Wrenn and 7. +1, reveal the top 4 cards of your library, put all land cards revealed this way into your hand, and the rest into your graveyard, which is what they do now and activate. 0, ability, put any number of land cards from your hand onto the battlefield tapped. And -3, create a green tree creature token with reach, and this creature's power and toughness are each equal to the number of lands you control. Notably, all the cards they are discarding are going to be exiled due to Planar Void. And if they get to the ultimate, return all permanent cards from your graveyard to your hand. You get an emblem with, you have no maximum hand size. Ooh, and one of the cards they do lose is Splendid Reclamation. They play their Terramorphic Expanse from their graveyard, but now it is going to get exiled. So the Planar Void is affecting the Ashaya player negatively. Luckily for us, it shouldn't hurt us too much. They put a Forest into play tapped, and that's it for their turn. Lord Xander plays a land for turn. And now they cast Sphinx's Tutelage. Whenever you draw a card, target opponent mills 2 cards. If 2 non-land cards that share a color were milled this way, repeat this process. And for 6 mana, you can draw a card and then discard a card. Well, that card shouldn't hurt us too much, seeing as we are a 5-color deck. And that is their turn done. Well, that's good news for us. Once again, we have no blockers, thanks to Lord Xander, so Yuriko's triggers are going to happen again. And we draw Mirror Entity for turn. That is actually quite a good draw. Okay, well, let's begin by moving to combat. We'll send Yuriko at Lord Xander, Shapesharer at Lord Xander, and Heron Blade Elite as well. Damage goes through, that gives us 2 Yuriko triggers. We draw a Grave Shifter, that hits our opponents for 4 damage, and then our second draw, we hit a land. So now in our second main phase, we'll play our Windswept Heath, then we'll play our Avian Changeling. That will trigger Heron Blade Elite, giving it a counter. Now we'll crack our Windswept Heath. That gets exiled due to Planar Void. We'll find a Sacred Foundry. We'll lose 2 life. Now we'll play Mirror Entity, and that triggers Heron Blade Elite once again. And now we'll cast a regular cohort. That'll trigger Heron Blade Elite. On ETB, a regular cohort makes us another Shapeshifter, and that's going to trigger Heron Blade Elite once again. So now Heron Blade Elite is a 5/5. If we can keep it around until our next turn, it's going to tap for 5 mana, potentially more. And I think after that, we'll just pass the turn over and hope that we don't see a board wipe. Because one more hit with all of our creatures, and having Yuriko out should probably be it for our opponents. Ashaya begins by activating Wrenn and 7, looking at the top 4 cards of their library and putting all land cards revealed this way into their hand. Looks like they got quite a few, and the rest get exiled. Now they play a land for turn. Next they activate Badoka Gardener, putting a land into play. And now they cast Green Sun Zenith with X = 1. Search your library for a green creature card with mana value 1 or less in this case, put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle, and you shuffle Green Sun Zenith into its owner's library. And they find themselves an Allosaurus Shepherd. Now they cast their commander, Ashaya Soul of the Wild. Ashaya's power and toughness are each equal to the number of lands you control, and non-token creatures you control are forest lands in addition to their other types. And now they cast Storage Matrix. As long as Storage Matrix is untapped, each player chooses artifact, creature, or land during their untap step. That player can untap only permanents of the chosen type this step. Okay, that's an interesting card. And that is their turn done. And as we expected, Lord Xander chooses to untap their lands. On their draw step, Sphinx's Tutelage does trigger. Then they decide to target us. Okay, let's see what they get. It looks like they hit 2 lands from us, a Command Tower and Rogran Triome. Now they play their land for turn, a Crypt of the Eternals. When it ETBs, they gain 1 life. And now they cast Nemesis of Reason. Whenever Nemesis of Reason attacks, defending player mills 10 cards. And that is their turn done. Alright, in our untap step, we don't want to untap artifacts. Yes, we will choose to untap our creatures. We're going to go for a big Alpha Strike here. And we draw a Reflecting Pool for turn. That's nice to see, so we'll play that land. Now that turns our World Tree online, so all our lands tap for 1 mana of any colour. Now we're going to go for our big spicy play. We're going to tap down Heron Blade Elite. That's going to generate us 5 red mana. We'll make another 2 red mana. And let's resolve our Utvara Hellkite. That goes through. Let's move to combat. We'll send all our shapeshifters over at Lord Xander. That's going to trigger Utvara Hellkite 5 times, making us a 6/6 dragon. The Nemesis blocks our Mirror Entity. So unfortunately we do lose Mirror Entity to the Planar Void, it gets exiled. But we do get 4 Yuriko triggers from that, so let's hope we get some good draws. Our first one is a land, another land unfortunately, a Pact of the Serpent, and our last one is an Unsettled Mariner. So that does knock our opponents pretty low, 13 and 7 life respectively. But if our opponents definitely don't hit a board wipe, well, the dragons are going to be able to get it done, and they're going to make good blockers, especially for Ashaya. So I think we can just leave the turn there. We have to discard 2 cards here. We'll just get rid of our Grave Shifter, because we can't really use the graveyard at the moment. And we'll also get rid of a land, which will both go to exile. Ashaya decides to untap their lands for turn. Now Ashaya casts Mana Reflection. If you tap a permanent for mana, it produces twice as much of that mana instead. Now they follow that up with a Lifecrafter's Bestiary. At the beginning of your upkeep, scry 1. Whenever you cast a creature spell, you can pay green and draw a card. Now they cast Essence Warden, which does trigger Lifecrafter's Bestiary. Essence Warden says whenever another creature enters the battlefield, you gain a life. Next up, they cast Into the Wilds. At the beginning of your upkeep, look at the top card of your library. If it's a land card, you may put it onto the battlefield. Now they tap Badoka Gardener to put a land from their hand into play. They just decide to pass through combat, and that's the end of their turn. Okay guys, well it all comes down to Lord Xander's turn here. If they have a board wipe, we're going to be set back pretty hard. If they don't, then it should be pretty easy for us to take the game. Now in their draw step, Sphinx's Tutelage does trigger and it targets us once again. This time we lose a land and Realm Walker. They start by playing a land for turn. They sack their Terramorphic Expanse, it does get exiled, so now they can put a basic land into play tapped. Next up they cast an Arcane Signet, and then they follow that up with Leyline of the Void. If a card would be put into an opponent's graveyard from anywhere, exile it instead. Well, it's looking good for us guys. I think we've got it here. So they move to attack, they do swing at us with the Nemesis of Reason, and we do have the Ashaya player scoop there. I think they know it's all over. We're going to mill 10 cards now. We'll block with 2 of our dragons. And they scoop it up there and we take the game. Alright guys, let's go to the review and discuss what happened. So for this game, everything went according to plan. We were able to resolve a number of changelings as well as a powerful tribal lord, all without seeing a board wipe. When these things happen, games like this are the result. Now the one thing I love about playing this deck is that it's very rich in flavour and thematic, but sometimes because of this it can be seen as a bit of a meme. However, if we're able to resolve a powerful tribal lord like Yuriko Najila or Atvara Hellkite, all supported by a bunch of changelings, suddenly the deck isn't so memey anymore. Well, that's it from me today. I hope you enjoyed seeing Tribal back in action, and if you want to see any more games from this or any other channel decks, keep your eyes posted for a future video where I will be taking your requests again. But until then, take care guys.